This series begins by showing a caveman named Spear stands atop the cliff, looking out over the vast wilderness that surrounds him. He can't help but feel overwhelmed by the events of the day. It had started out as a simple fishing trip, but had quickly turned into a struggle for survival. First, there was the giant alligator that had attacked him in the stream. Spear had been lucky to escape with his life, diving underwater and using all of his strength to swim to safety. But his luck had not held out for long. As he made his way home, he had been confronted by an aerodactyl, a terrifying prehistoric creature with wings as sharp as knives. Spear had been forced to hide in a tree, heart pounding in his chest, as the creature swooped down towards him. But the worst was yet to come. When Spear arrived at his home, he found that a group of horned Tyrannosaurus had attacked and killed his mate and children. Overcome with grief and rage, he had thrown his spear at one of the beasts, only to be confronted by their mother, who had roared in warning and led her offspring away. Now, as the sun begins to set and the shadows grow long, Spear can't help but feel lost and alone. He stands atop the cliff, looking out at the wilderness that surrounds him, wondering what the future holds. But even as he grieves for his lost family, he knows that he must find a way to move on, to continue fighting for his survival in this harsh and unforgiving world. Spear stood at the edge of the cliff, staring out at the vast expanse of wilderness before him. He was filled with grief and despair, unable to shake the image of his wife and children, brutally murdered by a group of horned Tyrannosaurus. As the sun rose the following morning, Spear found himself drawn back to the water's edge, where he spent the day catching and eating fish raw, lost in his own thoughts. But his solitude was short-lived. As he sat by the water's edge, he was startled by the sudden appearance of a Tyrannosaurus, carrying a fish in its mouth. The creature raced past him, disappearing into a nearby cave. Curious, Spear followed the dinosaur into the cave, where he discovered a mother Tyrannosaurus and her two young offspring. As he watched, a group of horned Tyrannosaurus burst into the cave, intent on preying on the young dinosaurs. Overcome with rage, Spear stepped forward to defend the helpless creatures, his spear clutched firmly in his hand. Together with the mother Tyrannosaurus, Fang, they fought bravely against the attackers, killing two of the three beasts. But as they were about to defeat the final dinosaur, it grabbed Fang and dragged her away, intent on eating her young. Without hesitation, Spear raced to the aid of his ally, jumping into the mouth of the beast and plunging his spear deep into its chest. As the dinosaur fell to the ground, Fang watched in amazement as Spear emerged victorious, her young safe and sound. Together, they stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges the future held. Spear and Fang fought side by side against the ferocious dinosaur, their combined skills and strength a formidable force to be reckoned with. Despite being pushed away and falling into a puddle of water, Spear refused to give up, determined to protect his ally and her young. With Fang by his side, he mounted her back and charged at the dinosaur, using all of his strength and cunning to bring the beast down. In a final, desperate move, Spear jumped onto the dinosaur's back and plunged his spear through its head, watching as its eyes turned bloodshot and it roared in pain before collapsing to the ground, dead. As the battle came to an end, Spear looked to Fang, lying in her nest and mourning the loss of her young. Taking pity on her, he walked out of the cave and onto the beach, with Fang following close behind. She lay at his feet, and he smiled as he mounted her once again, feeling a sense of purpose and belonging as he rode through the jungle. Together, Spear and Fang hunted for food, chasing wild boars and using their skills to bring down their prey. But as they set their sights on their next target, Fang pushed Spear out of the way, eager to claim the kill for herself. Despite his annoyance, Spear couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and admiration for his fierce companion, as they worked together to survive in the harsh and unforgiving wilderness. As Spear makes his way through the woods, he spots a running boar and quickly climbs to the top of a tree to hunt it. But when he arrives at the animal's side, he finds that Fang has beaten him to the kill, and is already feasting on the boar's flesh. Angered by this, Spear walks away and settles for eating an insect that happens to wander past him. Later, as he goes to relieve himself, he is disgusted to find that Fang has defecated right next to him, leaving a large, foul-smelling pile. The next day, Spear spies a fruit tree and climbs up to pluck some of the ripe fruit. But before he can even get his hands on any of it, Fang hits the tree repeatedly, causing both Spear and the fruit to fall to the ground. Fang then nonchalantly eats the fruit, leaving Spear fuming with anger. As the day wears on, the two find themselves in a cave, where Spear sits in a corner while Fang snores loudly nearby. To pass the time, Spear fashions some animals out of his fingers, but he is startled when he sees a horned dinosaur and becomes frightened. Glaring at Fang in anger, he eventually calms down and falls asleep. The following morning, Spear and Fang continue their journey, walking past a waterfall with sharp spikes. As they make their way through the woods, they come across a deer, which promptly runs away at the sight of them. Fang gives chase, but Spear manages to stop her and yells at her until he is hoarse. Exasperated, he eventually walks away, leaving Fang staring after him in confusion. Determined to catch the deer he had spotted earlier, Spear follows its trail and hides in a nearby bush, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. But before he can even make a move, Fang arrives and kills the deer herself. Furious at being denied his prey, Spear and Fang engage in a fierce fight, with Fang ultimately breaking Spear's spear and roaring in victory. Determined not to give up, Spear breaks off 2 branches from a nearby tree and uses them as makeshift weapons to continue fighting Fang. But despite his best efforts, Fang ultimately overpowers him, grabbing him in her mouth and attempting to bite him. At the last moment, she relents and throws him into the water instead. As Spear struggles to get back to his feet, the two of them hear a hissing sound and turn to find a large number of snakes covering the woods. They immediately begin to run, but a flood follows closely behind them, pushing the snakes along with it. In the ensuing chaos, Spear and Fang find themselves fighting against snakes underwater. A giant snake singles out Spear as its prey, but Fang intervenes, biting and killing the serpent before it can do any harm. As they swim to the surface, they realize that they are about to go over a waterfall. Desperately, Spear grabs hold of the giant snake's body and uses it to anchor himself and Fang to a nearby rock, but it slips out of his hand at the last moment, and they both plummet over the edge. Spear hits several rocks on the way down before finally hitting the ground and passing out. When he comes to, he finds that Fang has carried him to the shore and is watching over him worriedly. Relieved to be alive, Spear slowly stirs and eventually wakes up. As Spear lies on the ground, Fang approaches him and coughs up the tip of his spear, offering it to him as a sign of peace. Moved by this gesture, the two of them decide to work together and set off in search of a wild boar to hunt. That night, as they huddle around a warm fire, Spear manages to kill a snake that had been frightening Fang. The next day, a herd of woolly mammoths strides through the area, blanketed in a thick snowstorm. Among them is an older mammoth, severely wounded and struggling to keep up with the rest of the herd. It eventually loses track of the others and trumpets in distress as it tries to find them. Wandering alone, the mammoth comes across some footprints on the ground and gets down on its knees, trying to make its way down a hill. But before it can go any further, Spear emerges from hiding and attacks it. Fang also appears, but the mammoth pushes Spear away and the two stand their ground. As the mammoth struggles to fight back, Spear hits its eye repeatedly with a rock, and Fang helps him push it down as he continues his assault. Staring into the mammal's eyes, Spear feels a moment of remorse as it struggles to get back up, but ultimately he gives it the killing blow and the woolly mammoth dies. Grateful for the fresh meat and warmth it will provide, Spear tears off some of the mammoth's wool and uses it to make a coat for himself. Together, he and Fang remove the meat from the mammoth's carcass and prepare it for cooking. When the time comes to move their sled, Spear tries to get Fang to help him drag it, but she stubbornly refuses and walks away. Undeterred, Spear uses the sled's tusk to drag it through the snowy wilderness, struggling through a fierce storm. As they make their way, Fang becomes separated from Spear and frantically roars as she searches for him. Eventually, Spear emerges from the storm, and the two of them sit on the ground, catching their breath. As the storm rages on, Spear and Fang spot a nearby cave and decide to seek shelter there. Meanwhile, the herd of woolly mammoths has discovered the body of their fallen comrade, and their leader is horrified to find that one of its tusks is missing. Roaring in anger, the leader sees the tracks left behind by Spear and Fang and sets off in pursuit. Inside the cave, Fang eats some of the leftover mammoth meat and offers some to Spear, but he refuses. Instead, he draws a depiction of the mammoth on the cave wall, reminiscing about the time he took his son hunting. In his memory, Spear and his son disguise themselves as animals and stalk their prey, with Spear eventually giving his son a weapon and jumping in to kill the animal himself. As the animal dies, Spear places his hand on it and his son follows suit. As Spear sits in the cave, lost in thought, a strange force hits it repeatedly, causing the cave to begin collapsing. Frightened, Spear and Fang run for their lives as the cave crumbles around them. As the cave crumbles around them, Spear and Fang flee for their lives. They are caught off guard by a herd of woolly mammoths, who seem to be attacking them. Despite their best efforts, they are no match for the powerful beasts, and are quickly overpowered. In a desperate attempt to save her, Spear tries to reach Fang, but he is pushed aside by one of the mammoths. He falls to the ground, narrowly avoiding the debris from the collapsing cave. Fang's roars of pain reach Spear's ears, and he struggles to get back on his feet. Determined to save her, he charges towards the herd leader, who is holding Fang in its tusks. He manages to knock the mammoth off balance, causing it to drop Fang. The herd seems to sense Spear's strength and determination, and they back off, allowing him to take the tusk of the leader as a symbol of peace. The herd walks away, leaving Spear and Fang to tend to their wounds. But their troubles are far from over. A swarm of velociraptors is hot on their heels, and they are forced to run for their lives once again. Despite the raptor's fierce attacks, Spear manages to fight them off, using the skills he has learned as a hunter. Fang is bitten on the leg by one of the raptors, but she manages to shake it off and continue running. Finally, they reach safety, battered and bruised but alive. As Spear and Fang run from the swarm of velociraptors, they enter a crop field, hoping to lose their pursuers among the rows of plants. But the raptors are relentless, and they continue to follow the two friends. Emerging from the field, Spear and Fang find themselves surrounded by the raptors, with no way out. Just as all hope seems lost, the sun goes down, and the raptors suddenly turn and run away, leaving Spear and Fang confused and relieved. As they continue their journey, a blood moon rises in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. They walk through a misty field and come across a series of strange pillars, each adorned with skulls. The pillars startle Spear, but Fang seems unfazed, and the two continue on their way. As they walk, they have the distinct feeling that they are being watched. Hiding behind a rock, they see a feral man approaching, carrying a boar. The man slips and falls, breaking his knee in the process. He roars in pain, and several more feral people emerge from the surrounding bushes. One of them rushes to help the injured man, but he is snatched away by a strange flying animal, a giant bat. Feeling a sense of compassion, Spear decides to help the man and carries him and the boar back to their cave. The feral people crawl into the walls to hide, and the giant bat emerges, ready to attack. But before it can strike, Fang leaps into action, decapitating the creature with a swift blow. More giant bats appear, and Spear picks up his weapon, ready to fight alongside his friend. As Spear fights off the giant bats, one of them tries to grab him, but he manages to stab it through the mouth, killing it. He sees several other bats lifting Fang into the air and rushes to stop them. One of the bats manages to carry him away, while Fang fights off the remaining bats and pursues the one that has taken Spear. Despite his struggles, Spear is unable to break free from the bat's grasp and eventually hits his head on a rock, knocking him unconscious. Meanwhile, Fang arrives at the giant bat's cave, which she sees as a vertical hill. She tries to climb it, but the surface is too steep, and she falls to the ground. As she stares up at the bats flying out of the cave, an idea comes to her. She roars at the bats and pretends to be dead, hoping to trick them into lowering their guard. The plan works, and the bats fly down to her, carrying her into the cave. They place her on a pile of dead animals and fly away, leaving her alone in the dark. Fang gets up and begins exploring the cave, searching for Spear. She comes across a tunnel with cobwebs on the walls and realizes that there must be people trapped inside. As she approaches, a giant spider emerges and walks towards her. The spider attacks Fang with its webs, trying to pull her closer. She bites its leg, causing it to slam her against the walls. Despite the spider's strength, Fang refuses to give up. She fights back, determined to find Spear and free him from the webs that bind him. As Spear grabbed a rock and swung it at the spider, it managed to hit him and send him flying. But he quickly recovered and, noticing a nearby dead dinosaur, grabbed its horn and used it to stab the spider in the head. The spider collapsed, but before Spear and Fang could celebrate their victory, they saw a swarm of bats heading towards their cave. Spear had an idea and ran back to the spider's body. He climbed inside its mouth and began pulling out the web it had stored inside. He wrapped the web around Fang and then pushed her out of the cave, using the web to slow their descent. Once they were safely out of the cave, Spear and Fang ran as fast as they could, trying to put as much distance between themselves and the approaching bats as possible. But the bats were relentless, and soon they were right on the heels of Spear and Fang. Just when it seemed like the bats would catch up to them, Spear saw a crop field in the distance and had a plan. He led Fang towards the field, hoping to lure the bats inside where they could be attacked by the raptors that lived there. The plan worked, and as the raptors swooped in to attack the bats, Spear and Fang made their escape. Exhausted and hungry, they continued their journey through the jungle, searching for food and water. Eventually, they stumbled upon a beautiful stream, and Spear couldn't resist the temptation to jump in and catch some fish with his bare hands. He shared his catch with Fang, and the two of them sat by the water's edge, enjoying the peaceful moment. As a butterfly flew by, Fang chased after it and discovered a swarm of butterflies just a short distance away. Feeling rejuvenated and grateful for their friendship, Spear and Fang made hand and paw prints in the soft ground by the stream, cementing their bond and their memories of this special day. An earthworm suddenly emerged from the ground and startled her, bringing back memories of the snakes she had encountered earlier. She quickly turned and ran, leaving the earthworm behind for Spear to eat. Determined to have some fun, Spear decided to swim deeper into the water. He grinned at Fang as he dove under the surface, hoping to play a prank on her. But when he emerged from the water, Fang was nowhere to be found. Following a set of footprints, Spear set off into the woods to find her. As he searched, he was suddenly knocked unconscious. When he came to, he found himself tied up next to Fang, surrounded by ape men. One of the ape men climbed up onto a platform and ordered the ceremony to begin. The apes began fighting each other, and in the final match, a small blue ape faced off against a much larger opponent. Using its quick movements and agility, the blue ape was able to defeat the larger one and emerge as the winner. As the ceremony came to a close, the ape men lowered Fang and a man with a staff approached, pouring a drop of a strange liquid into the victorious ape's mouth. The ape began to mutate and grow, transforming into a much larger ape before their eyes. As the giant ape loomed over her, Fang struggled to free herself from the ropes that bound her. She tried to fight back, but the ape was too powerful and easily knocked her down. From his place on the ground, Spear watched in horror as the ape broke Fang's leg. Meanwhile, Spear was struggling to free himself. He watched as Fang fought bravely, but it was clear that she was no match for the giant ape. He climbed to her feet and, with all of her might, punched the ape in the eye. The ape roared in pain and threw her aside. Desperate to help her, he searched for a way to break free of his bonds. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Spear saw an opportunity. He watched as the ape man with the staff approached, and with a burst of strength, he managed to push the man aside and grab the strange liquid for himself. As the other ape men attacked, he drank the liquid and began to mutate, growing in size and strength. The transformation gave Spear the power he needed to fight back. He charged at the giant ape and engaged it in a fierce battle, tearing off its arms and beating it to death. The ape men, realizing that Spear was now too strong for them to defeat, tried to run away, but Spear was not about to let them escape. He chased them down and slaughtered them, leaving no survivors. As the sun rose the next morning, the effects of the strange liquid wore off and Spear returned to his normal size. He rushed to Fang's side and was devastated to find her unconscious and badly injured. He held her in his arms and cried, overcome with grief and anger. As Fang began coughing up blood, Spear knew he had to act fast. He ran to get some bags of water, determined to save her life. Spear realized that Fang was in trouble when he saw vultures flying around her. Determined to help her, he brought water to her and used it to create mud, which he used to cover her injuries. However, more vultures arrived, making it difficult for him to protect her. Despite this, he persisted and did his best to cover all of her injuries. Fang was too heavy for Spear to carry, so he looked for a way to transport her. He found some bamboo sticks and vines and used a sharp rock to create a weapon. He then used the bamboo sticks and vines to construct a makeshift bed for Fang. It was a struggle to get her onto the bed, but he eventually succeeded. As he carried her through the jungle, vultures attacked them, but he was able to dodge them. After walking for a long time, Spear stopped to rest. He went to a stream to get water for Fang, but as he was feeding her, he noticed a wild dog watching them. In order to protect Fang, he gathered sticks and made a fire around her. He then sat by her side as she fell asleep, keeping watch over her through the night. The next morning, Spear woke up to find that Fang had fallen asleep beside her. She looked around, but saw that no one was attacking them. Spear decided to continue moving, and tied the makeshift bed to himself using the vines so he could carry Fang with him. As they walked through the woods, several wild dogs began following them. In order to protect Fang, Spear led them to a nearby cave and chased the dogs away. He then kept watch over Fang, building fires around the cave to keep them safe through the night. However, their safety was short-lived as a swarm of flesh-eating beetles attacked them. Spear did his best to push them away, but their shells were too strong to break. He tried stabbing them, but that didn't work either. Instead, he turned them around and stabbed them in the stomach, killing them. He then roasted the beetles and served them as food to Fang. The following day, Spear fed Fang and stepped out of the cave to assess their surroundings. He sensed that the wild dogs were still nearby and used several rocks to barricade the cave. The dogs circled the cave, searching for a way to enter, but Spear returned and fought them off, killing some of them. Spear and Fang are in a cave, tending to each other's wounds when they hear the approaching dogs. Determined to protect themselves, Spear dons a pair of knuckles made from beetles, ready for a fight. As the dogs charge towards him, Spear bravely battles and defeats them, with Fang joining in to help. After the victorious but bloody battle, the duo is confronted with a herd of Brachiosaurus peacefully grazing in the forest. One of the Brachiosaurus notices a strange, seemingly sick dinosaur emerge from the woods and begins behaving erratically. Despite the Brachiosaurus's attempts to ignore the dinosaur, it approaches and bites its leg. The Brachiosaurus kicks the dinosaur away, but it soon coughs up blood and dies. The Brachiosaurus, now showing signs of sickness itself, walks to a pond and drinks the water, only to begin vomiting blood. As the other dinosaurs watch in shock, the sick Brachiosaurus's eyes become bloodshot, and it starts to go crazy before finally collapsing. As the infected Brachiosaurus rampages through the forest, it crushes the eggs of its own kind and violently attacks the herd, killing them all. One desperate Brachiosaurus tries to flee, but the infected dinosaur catches up and brutally impales it on a tree with sharp spikes. Spear and Fang arrive on the scene to find the herd of Brachiosaurus slaughtered. They are bewildered by the mysterious force that could have caused such destruction. As they stand in shock, the infected Brachiosaurus appears behind them and roars ferociously. The two run for their lives, with the infected dinosaur in hot pursuit, breaking through the trees that stand in its way. Spear jumps on Fang's back, and the duo races through the forest as fast as they can. The infected Brachiosaurus gives chase, but eventually gets stuck as they slide down a hill. It breaks through the tree and crashes to the ground, giving Spear and Fang the opportunity to escape and hide in a cave. That night, Spear has a nightmare where he and Fang are attacked by the infected Brachiosaurus. In the nightmare, it bites him and his skin falls off, while Fang melts away. As they lay on the cave floor, Spear and Fang pray that the nightmare will not come true. Spear wakes up to find the infected Brachiosaurus lying on the ground outside the cave, with Fang standing beside him. He decides to leave the cave and convinces Fang to come with him. The two walk down the path beside the hill, passing the infected dinosaur and a field of sea warts. As they walk away quietly, the infected dinosaur suddenly springs to life and attacks them. Spear and Fang run for their lives, with the infected dinosaur in hot pursuit. As they run, Spear gets hit by falling rocks, but he manages to keep going. The duo manages to evade the dinosaur as it gets stuck between two walls. As they watch it struggle to break free, they decide to continue walking. Their journey takes them through a lava geyser field, where the splashing lava touches Spear. The infected dinosaur eventually breaks free and rushes towards the geyser field, breaking through the ground and falling into the lava. Spear and Fang run away and narrowly avoid falling into a hole in the ground themselves. As they escape the geyser field, they watch as the infected dinosaur burns to death. Exhausted and covered in sweat and dirt, Spear and Fang walk through the woods towards a strange green light. As Spear and Fang were exploring the strange land, they stumbled upon a mysterious symbol etched onto a rock. Suddenly, their attention was drawn to a tribe of peculiar beings who were in the process of tying a man to a pile of rocks above a glowing green fire. As they watched in shock, an aerodactyl swooped down from the sky and landed on a nearby hill, its back carrying a humanoid creature. This being hovered above the ground and made its way towards the man, transforming into a horned creature with a green snake writhing out of its eye. The snake slithered into the man's mouth, causing strange tattoos on his body to crawl out and make their way towards his stomach. As this happened, the man rapidly aged until he finally took his last breath. The snake returned to the horned being's mouth, where it transformed into a baby. The being then took the infant and placed it with a nearby woman. Just as Spear and Fang were trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed, the horned being noticed their presence and shouted at the tribe to pursue them. Spear and Fang fled, but they were separated in the chaos. A woman from the tribe used her mysterious powers to put Fang under her control and capture Spear, binding him to the rock where he had been tied the previous night. When Spear woke up the next morning, he saw the woman walking past with Fang under her spell. He screamed at her, and the spell began to wear off. As the woman tried to reinforce the spell on Fang, she noticed that she was resisting. She decided to delve into her mind and saw the hatch of her newborn children. She watched as Spear helped Fang defend her offspring, but they were ultimately eaten by the horned dinosaur. Feeling remorse, the woman stepped out of the portal and hugged Fang. She then turned her attention to Spear, deciding to delve into his mind as well. Inside, she saw him raising his newborn child, only to watch in horror as they too were killed by the same predatory dinosaurs that had taken Fang's babies. As she emerged from Spear's mind, the woman gave him a sad look before returning to her own home. There, she found a drawing of her own child and was reminded of the memory of receiving the infant from the strange being. The woman spent the day playing with her child in a field of flowers, but tragedy struck when the young one wandered off and fell from a cliff to their death. Another woman came to the house and offered the grieving mother a bowl of the green paint used in the ritual. With renewed purpose, the woman climbed onto Fang and set off to find Spear. As the woman approached Spear, he roared at her in defiance. Undeterred, she drew the mysterious symbols on him and quickly retreated as she saw a butterfly land on him. Later that night, the strange horned being arrived and made its way towards Spear. The woman climbed a nearby hill and used a spear to kill the creature. Fang emerged from the shadows and attempted to attack the being as the woman freed Spear. The being transformed into a wolf and fought against Fang, but the woman transformed into a hawk and joined the fray. In the chaos, Fang stood in front of Spear and carried him away as they ran. The being bit the woman's hand and threw her to the ground, growling as it prepared to kill her. However, just before it could strike, Fang was released from the woman's control and attacked the being, causing it to flee. The woman was reunited with her daughter in the afterlife, where she found peace and happiness. As the sun set on the forest, a saber-toothed tiger walked through the woods. Suddenly, it stopped in its tracks as it saw a strange animal lurking in the shadows. The creature attacked the tiger, causing it to grow to an enormous size. Meanwhile, Spear and Fang sat by a campfire, listening to the eerie sounds emanating from the forest. The next day, they ventured into the woods and came upon the tiger's lifeless body. Fang roared as he sniffed the corpse, and the two continued on their journey. As they walked, the sun gradually set and the night was filled with the sounds of a herd of ceratopsians being attacked by the mysterious monster. As the monster killed several ceratopsians, Spear heard the commotion and grabbed his spear in preparation for a fight. However, Fang stopped him and roared, refusing to let him intervene. The two sat by the fire and listened to the desperate screeching and wailing of the dying dinosaurs. The following morning, Spear and Fang were at a stream when they heard a strange noise. Bracing themselves for a fight, they were surprised to see a small dinosaur running towards them. Fang chased the creature away, and Spear climbed to the top of a nearby tree to get a better view of the incident. As he watched, he felt a sense of guilt for not having intervened to help the ceratopsians. As they continued their journey, Spear and Fang were met with strong winds that forced them to seek shelter behind a rock. Suddenly, they heard a loud screech that sent shivers down their spine. That night, they sat by a fire and fell asleep as the flames died down. They were awoken by the same screeching sound and prepared for battle, with Spear covered in sweat and Fang's heart beating rapidly. As the creature approached, Spear and Fang knew they had to act fast. They sprinted into the thick fog, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Suddenly, the mysterious creature attacked, but they were quick on their feet, dodging and weaving as they tried to escape. The creature chased after Spear, destroying everything in its path. Fang stood her ground, waiting for the right moment to strike, and when it came, she attacked with ferocity, wounding the creature. The sound of the creature's shrieks of pain filled the air, but it only motivated Spear and Fang to continue fighting. They knew they couldn't give up now. As they battled on, Spear swung his weapon around and accidentally created a spark. To their surprise, the creature fled at the sight of the light. It seemed to be afraid of it. Taking advantage of this new discovery, Spear and Fang chased the creature down as the sun began to set. They set several trees on fire, trapping the creature in a ring of flames. With a mighty throw, Spear launched his spear at the creature, watching as it burned to death. Panting and triumphant, Spear and Fang stood in the water, catching fish for their dinner. Fang managed to snag a giant catch, but Spear tossed his back into the water, deeming it too small. They had won the day, and now it was time to rest and celebrate their victory. As Spear tried to catch more fish, he watched as they swam away, just out of reach. Suddenly, a strange woman appeared out of nowhere. Before they could react, a Lioplerodon attacked, dragging Fang into the water. Spear didn't hesitate. He jumped into the water to help Fang and fought off the beast, killing it in the process. He emerged from the water, ready to pursue the mysterious woman. He chased her through the woods and finally caught up to her, sitting down in front of her. Fang let out a fierce roar, trying to intimidate the woman, but she was unfazed, turning and running away. Undeterred, Spear and Fang continued their pursuit. After what felt like an eternity, they finally caught up to the woman. Spear stopped Fang from growling and the two of them sat on the ground in front of her. Spear started a fire to warm her up, but Fang continued to growl. Spear put a stop to it and leaned against the woman, falling asleep. That night, the woman gazed up at the moon and performed a strange prayer as Spear watched quietly. The next morning, they woke up and continued on their journey, with the woman following close behind. As they walked, the woman accidentally bumped into Fang, who let out another ferocious roar. But before things could escalate, a giant bug flew around them. Fang quickly ate it, diffusing the tension. They caught an animal and ate it raw, with the woman gathering ingredients for their meal. Using a turtle shell as a makeshift cooking pot, the woman prepared their meal. She offered some to Spear, but Fang snatched it up and ran off. Undeterred, the woman gave Spear another piece of food, but he didn't like it and tossed it aside. That night, the woman performed her strange prayer and Spear watched in fascination. As the sun rose the next morning, he noticed the woman struggling with the restraint around her neck. He dragged her away, and Fang bit it off, freeing her. With a rock, Spear broke the shackles on her wrists, and the woman stared up at the sun, a smile spreading across her face. She turned to Spear and introduced herself as Mira, but he simply walked away. Mira followed them, gathering supplies as they went. As they hunted for their next meal, Spear missed his shot on a large animal. Mira stepped in, using an arrow to take it down, leaving Spear and Fang in shock. They roasted the animal, and Mira tried to engage Spear in conversation. But he didn't understand her words, so she used a stick to draw on the ground. In her native language, Mira told the story of how her people were attacked and forced into slavery. She depicted a strange man with horns, showing how she ran away and ended up on this journey. As they continued on their journey together, it was clear that they had formed a strong bond, despite their rocky start. Fang was scared of climbing some rocky cliffs. Spear yelled at Fang, trying to get her to climb the rocky cliffs, but she stubbornly refused. Mira, however, had a different plan. She ran off into the woods and came back with a handful of bugs. Using them as bait, she managed to coax Fang up the rocks. That night, Spear drew the moon on the sand and Mira lay down to sleep. The next morning, they woke up to find several ape men lurking nearby. Without hesitation, the ape men abducted Mira and ran off with her. Spear and Fang gave chase, determined to save her. Spear picked up a makeshift hammer and, as they ran, they saw several ape men lying dead with arrows stuck in them. They followed the footprints on the ground and heard Mira's screams. They reached the shore just in time to see a ship sailing away, the same symbol that was on Mira's head emblazoned on its sails. Spear stood on the shore, calling out Mira's name as the ship disappeared into the horizon. Fang let out a mighty roar, their sadness and anger palpable. Spear stood on the beach, yelling at Mira. He was determined to swim out to sea, but the powerful waves kept pushing him back to shore. Fang watched from the sand, unable to help her friend. As Spear glared at the ocean, something caught his eye. A leaf was floating on the water's surface, swaying with the movement of the waves. Determined to find a way across the water, Spear rushed into the nearby trees and began chopping them down with his makeshift hammer. Fang joined in, using her teeth and tail to cut through the wood. The two worked together, gathering logs of wood as the sun set. By the time they were finished, they were exhausted. Fang fell asleep while Spear began piecing together a raft. The following morning, Spear woke Fang and asked her to climb aboard the raft, but she refused, shaking her head stubbornly. Spear knew he needed to find a way to persuade her, so he headed into the woods and gathered a handful of bugs. With these as bait, he finally convinced Fang to get on the raft. Pushing off from the shore, Spear and Fang set out on their journey across the ocean, but as the hours passed, Spear grew tired. Eventually, he collapsed onto the raft, too exhausted to continue. Fang took over, using her tail to push them forward through the choppy water. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, they sailed on, hoping to find land on the other side. As the moon rose in the sky, casting a soft glow over the water, Spear and Fang lay on their raft, listening to the strange noises coming from beneath them. Suddenly, they were startled awake by the sight of several whales swimming alongside them. Screaming in fear, they watched as the whales submerged back into the depths of the ocean. As the sun rose the next morning, Spear woke to find Fang ravenous with hunger. Determined to find food, he jumped into the water and began swimming around, searching for something to eat. But no matter how far he swam, he couldn't find any food. Exhausted, he returned to the surface to catch his breath. Fang roared at him in frustration, and he yelled back, equally frustrated. The two lay on the raft, feeling the heat of the sun beating down on their skin. Suddenly, they heard a strange noise coming from beneath the water. Spear dived in to investigate, and saw a giant turtle swimming towards him. Without hesitation, he grabbed the turtle and began strangling it as it thrashed about in the water. Fang watched hungrily from the raft, drool dripping from her jaws. Spear swam to the surface for air, then dived back down, continuing to struggle with the turtle. It tried to attack him, but he was too quick, dodging its blows and continuing to squeeze. Eventually, he managed to swim underneath the raft, forcing the turtle's head to stick out of the water. Fang saw her chance and lunged, biting down on the turtle's neck and killing it instantly. Grateful for the food, Spear and Fang dragged the turtle onto the raft and feasted on its meat. As they ate, Spear had an idea. He used the turtle's shell to create a makeshift shelter, providing them with some much-needed shade. As they continued their journey, they were interrupted by several fish jumping out of the water. Flying dinosaurs emerged from the sky and attacked them, snatching up the fish as they passed. But Spear and Fang were undaunted, continuing on their journey with renewed strength and determination. As a storm raged on, a megalodon emerged from the depths of the ocean. It attacked the raft, destroying it and sending Spear and Fang tumbling into the water. The megalodon set its sights on Fang, but she was quick and managed to dodge its attacks. The megalodon switched its focus to Spear, who was also evading its bites. But eventually, the creature caught Spear in its mouth. Desperate, he grabbed a nearby piece of wood and used it to stab the megalodon's mouth, causing it to release him. Swimming as fast as he could, Spear made his way to Fang's side. But as they tried to escape, a massive wave hit them, separating them and tossing them around in the turbulent water. When Fang woke up, she was lying on a sandy beach. She looked around, but there was no sign of Spear. Roaring in frustration, she ran up and down the beach, searching for him. But no matter where she looked, she couldn't find him. Defeated, Fang returned to the beach and sat down to wait. As the sun set, she heard a strange noise coming from the nearby forest. Curiously, she went to investigate, hoping it might be Spear. But when she arrived, all she saw was a rock and a stick arranged in a way that looked vaguely like a person. Disappointed, Fang continued walking, eventually coming across another Tyrannosaurus named Red. Red ran away at the sight of her, and Fang followed, determined to find out what he was up to. As she stood atop a large rock, Red watched her from a distance, hidden behind another boulder. But eventually, he lost interest and wandered off, leaving Fang alone once more. As Spear lay unconscious on the ground, a flying squirrel suddenly landed on his hand. It quickly caught a mosquito and devoured it as Spear lay motionless. Suddenly, a group of strange men appeared and carried Spear away. Meanwhile, Fang was chasing an animal through the forest when Red appeared. The two of them wrestled for the prey, growling and snarling at each other. In the end, Red let go of the animal and walked away, and Fang sat down to eat. She threw a piece of meat in Red's direction, and he ate it gratefully. The two of them feasted on the animal together, bonding over their shared love of food. As for Spear, he woke up in a strange room, covered in mud. He fell to the ground, his arm throbbing with pain as he remembered how he had broken it in the ocean. A woman, a witch doctor, entered the room and Spear panicked, running out of the room as fast as he could. The townspeople saw him and gave chase, but Spear was able to defend himself with his spear. One of the villagers, however, saw that Spear was hurt and afraid. He called off the attack and led Spear to safety, giving him food and water to help him recover. Meanwhile, Fang and Red continued their journey, walking through the forest and arriving at a fruit tree. They ate their fill of the sweet, juicy fruits and also discovered some fermented ones lying on the ground. As they ate, they both became tipsy, but they didn't let that stop them from continuing to eat. Spear is in need of medical attention and seeks out the help of a witch doctor. After being treated with a series of hits and a mysterious powder, he falls asleep. That night, Spear shares a meal with the doctor's family, but their daughter is frightened of him. Meanwhile, Red and Fang play and try to catch fireflies. As Spear wanders about, he comes across a wolf feasting on a piece of meat. Despite the wolf's initial growling, Spear is able to tame it and they share the meat. The next morning, Red and Fang awaken to find a thick fog blanketing the area. Red takes the lead as they sneak through a barrier and into a nearby town. As they make their way through the streets, Red suddenly starts attacking and eating the humans they encounter. Fang joins in on the attack, causing the people to scream in terror. Spear, who had been nearby, rushes to the scene and attempts to fight Red with a spear. However, Fang intervenes and prevents the confrontation from escalating further. The fight continues, with Red attempting to eat Spear and Fang desperately trying to stop him. Eventually, Red is kicked off the roof and falls onto a spike below, impaling him. Fang rushes to Red's side, concerned for its well-being. As she walks away from the dying Red, Fang can't shake the feeling of guilt for what she has done. Spear joins her, but the man tries to speak to him. Ignoring him, Spear walks on with Fang by his side. They take shelter from the rain in a cave, and Spear starts a fire to keep them warm. As he investigates the cave further, he finds ancient paintings on the walls. One in particular catches his eye, a hand painted on the rock, which he compares to his own hand. The next day, Spear steps out of the cave to find the forest transformed by the rain. He watches as humans hunt antelopes in a nearby field and is reminded of the painting he saw in the cave. As they continue their journey, they come across an old village, abandoned long ago. He can't help but wonder what life was like for the people who once lived in this village. Spear picks up an old spear and uses it to catch some food. As the sun sets, Spear returns to the cave with his latest kill. He drops it on the ground and settles in for the night. Later, Spear steps outside the cave and performs a ritual that he had seen Mira do in the past. Suddenly, an owl appears, staring at him intently. Spear chases it away and returns to the cave. The following morning, Spear and Fang are awoken by a strange noise. To their surprise, a bear emerges from the shadows, with a man riding on its back. The bear growls at them, and Fang roars back in defiance. The cave begins to shake as the two animals continue to roar at each other. Suddenly, the bear turns and runs out of the cave, with Spear and Fang hot on its heels. As they give chase, another bear appears from the cave entrance, scratching Spear's back as it passes. Fang roars at the bears, while Spear falls to the ground in pain. He quickly gets back to his feet, ready to fight. Spear and Fang easily defeat the man, while Fang takes down the bear. The second man prepares to fight them, but as Spear takes a closer look at the symbol on his shield, he realizes that it is the same one he had seen on Mira's head. Realizing that he can't win the fight, the man runs away, taking off his helmet as he goes. He trips and falls to the ground, but he tries to get up and continue running. However, Spear throws his spear, impaling the man's leg and bringing him down for good. Spear calls out Mira's name as he approaches the man, but instead of answering, the man stands up and prepares to fight. In the ensuing struggle, Fang grabs the man and eats him. Spear picks up the man's sword and begins to practice with it, discovering that he has a natural talent for sword fighting. As they continue their journey, they spot a footprint and decide to follow it. Running through the woods, they eventually arrive at a human town. Spear instructs Fang to stay in the woods while he goes into the town to search for Mira. He walks through the streets and finds several slaves being held in a building. When the slaves see him, they panic, but Mira recognizes him and rushes to hug him. Despite his desire to leave with Mira, she refuses to abandon the other slaves. Spear walks out of the building with Mira and the other slaves in tow. Suddenly, they hear a growling noise coming from the fog, and Spear prepares for a fight. Suddenly, several men riding on bears appear out of the fog. The slaves fall to their knees, but Spear stands his ground, ready to fight. One of the men on a bear sees Spear holding his comrade's sword and screams in rage. The men approach Spear, preparing to attack, but the bears start to grow uneasy, as if they can sense something is amiss. Spear smiles as the people wonder what is going on, and Fang emerges from the woods. She stands on a nearby building and roars, but she loses her balance and falls into the building. As Spear and Fang continue to fight the men, one of them tries to attack Spear from behind. But before he can land a blow, Fang jumps in and eats him. Together, Spear and Fang take on the remaining men and defeat most of them. Suddenly, a man emerges from his hut, alerted by the noise of the battle. He rushes to ring a bell, signaling that the town is under attack. The townspeople emerge from their homes and witness Spear and Fang fighting and killing several of their own. The chief's wife steps forward, ready to join the fray. Mira instructs the slaves to run into the forest, and one of the men follows her. As the townspeople surround Spear, he is shot with an arrow. Mira retaliates by killing the man's bear and beheading him with his own axe. Spear breaks through the townspeople's shields, but he is shot again. In the chaos, a young boy falls off a building. Rika emerges with her axe, ready to fight. She manages to injure Fang, but before she can do any more damage, Fang bites her and slams her to the ground repeatedly, killing her. Spear and Fang continue to fight the townspeople, with Spear pushing the boy away as he attacks him. The boy grabs onto Spear and throws him to the ground, but as he falls, he hits his head on a rock and dies. As the battle rages on, a red mist descends upon the town, making it difficult to see. Spear and Fang use the fog to their advantage, killing everyone they come across. Meanwhile, the chief and his older son, Eldar, return to the town with more slaves in tow. Eldar blows a horn, but there is no response. As they approach the dock, they see a trail of blood leading into the town. When they enter, Eldar vomits at the sight of the dead bodies scattered throughout the town. The fog clears, and the chief realizes that everyone in the town has been killed. He rushes around, searching for his wife, but eventually finds her dead on the ground. He screams her name and breaks down in tears. Eldar emerges with his younger brother, and together they decide not to bury the bodies in a traditional manner. Instead, they seal the bodies in a cave and block the entrance with a large rock. The three men return to their boat and release the slaves. They place Rika and the boys' bodies on the boat and push it into the water. The chief is too grief-stricken to do much more than watch as Eldar comforts him and takes a bow and arrow. Using it, he sets the boat on fire, burning the bodies of Rika and the boy. Together, they stand and watch as the boat is consumed by flames. They wear their armor, set the town on fire, and set out to have their revenge. Spear woke up to find himself on a boat with his injuries miraculously healed. He saw Mira tending to Fang's wounds and rushed over to her side. As she pulled out the arrows and treated her injuries, Spear couldn't help but feel grateful for her care. Later, as Spear and Fang woke up, they saw the fog rolling in. They knew they had to be ready for whatever came next. Mira and Spear grabbed their weapons and waited anxiously as they saw the chief and Eldar's ship approaching. The chief and Eldar rammed into Spear's ship, and the chief leaped onto the deck. Fang tried to attack him, but Eldar shot at her, causing her to retreat. Spear fought the chief, but his armor was too thick for any of Spear's attacks to penetrate. Meanwhile, Fang and Mira fought against Eldar as he shot arrows at them. Mira managed to hit Eldar, knocking him off the top of the ship, but Eldar was quick on his feet and landed safely on the ground. Spear kicked the chief, causing his helmet to fall off. The chief saw Fang attacking Eldar and rushed to save his son. As the ships hit some rocks, Fang threw Eldar off the ship and into the water. The chief jumped in after him, and Mira expertly navigated the boat to safety. She tried to tie the ship to a nearby tree, and Fang and Spear rushed to help her. Suddenly, Fang ran off into the woods, and they followed her. They watched as she gathered leaves and soil, and Spear realized that she wanted to lay eggs. He was overjoyed and helped her set up her nest. Meanwhile, the chief had saved his son from the water and was tending to his wounds. That night, the chief sat by the fire and saw a demonic entity staring back at him. He woke up with a start and saw Eldar emerging from the woods with an animal in tow. They stood by a stream, listening to the screeching of some birds, but the chief didn't seem to have any idea what to do next. Fang walked around her nest, carefully laying 3 eggs as Spear and Mira watched in fascination. Spear tried to touch the eggs, but Fang wouldn't let him. The next day, the chief and Eldar climbed a cliff as large birds flew around them. Eldar jumped onto one of the birds while the chief climbed the cliff. He tied a rope around the bird's neck and, with his son's help, managed to tame it. As Spear caught fish for Fang, Mira worked on fixing the ship. Eldar and the chief didn't try to attack the birds, instead choosing to swoop down and ride them. Fang fiercely protected her eggs from the attacking birds, but one of them managed to grab Mira and lift her into the air. Eldar tried to drop her, but she hung onto a rope for dear life. He cut the rope, and Mira fell, but Spear was there to catch her. Together, Spear and Mira fought the chief and managed to throw him off the ship. He fell through the woods and landed on the ground, miraculously surviving the fall. Despite his injuries, the chief stood up and saw Spear kicking Eldar off the bird. Eldar crashed onto a rock and died, and the chief let the water carry him away as he mourned the loss of his son. Spear and Mira reunited with Fang, and he hugged her tightly. The chief lay on a rock, preparing to accept his own death. But suddenly, some women floated down from the sky, trying to take him up with them. Strange demonic monsters dragged him back to the ground, however, and the chief found himself in the underworld. He went through a door and saw the demonic entity from his dream, finally facing him head-on and gaining the power he needed to defeat him. Meanwhile, back on the beach, Spear sat quietly while Mira looked annoyed. She packed food into the ship, and Spear realized that she wanted them to leave. He made a nest on the boat and tried to convince Fang to join them, but she was hesitant to leave her eggs behind. Mira tried to help, but it seemed like it would be an uphill battle to get Fang to come with them. They tricked Fang by separating her eggs and showing her the nest they had made for her on the boat. Realizing that her eggs would be safe, Fang climbed aboard and they set off. The next morning, Spear caught some fish and ate one. As they sailed, they saw a strange ship in the distance with smaller ships approaching them. Several Egyptian soldiers emerged from the ship and attacked them, but Mira and Spear fought back bravely while Fang protected her eggs. A giant African man named Camo appeared and knocked Spear out. Fang tried to fight Camo, but he was too strong and knocked her unconscious as well. One of her eggs broke in the scuffle. Fang woke up enraged and fought Camo with renewed vigor, and Spear and Mira joined in. But then, the Egyptian queen Ama appeared, holding Fang's eggs hostage. The soldiers captured Spear and the others and took them aboard the ship, separating Mira from the group and locking them in cells. Camo was also thrown in a cell, and Spear and Fang glared at him but eventually fell asleep. Fang woke up to see the soldiers trying to restrain her. She attacked them, but Ama entered with her egg and threatened to break it if Fang didn't cooperate. Reluctantly, Fang stopped fighting and allowed herself to be taken away. As Spear and Fang join the battle, they quickly become an asset to the soldiers fighting against the enemy. Spear climbs a tower and takes out the archers defending the city, while Fang helps the soldiers break into the city and attack the enemy soldiers. The enemy king is terrified as Spear and Fang roar, but his fear only grows as the chief, now a powerful monster, rises from the ground. He forms a weapon from his hand and displays his new powers, even walking on water as he approaches the stream. Ima arrives on the battlefield with Fang's eggs and Camo's daughter, Amal. She goes to the enemy king and finds a cheetah cub with him. Ima takes the cub and orders her men to kill the king. She then allows Camo to see his daughter, but Fang becomes protective as she is with her eggs. A soldier takes them all away from Camo and returns them to Ima. Fang roars at her, determined to continue fighting in the many wars to come. After a fierce battle, Spear, Fang, and Camo are injured and seek refuge in the ship, where they enter a pool to heal their wounds. They continue fighting in various wars, with Ima and her soldiers plundering the fallen kingdoms. One day, as they rest in the pool, they are suddenly attacked by a different kingdom. Their enemy's king is shocked to see Spear, Fang, and Camo easily defeating his soldiers. The Egyptians emerge victorious and sink their enemy's ships. As Spear rests in his cell that night, he stands up and frowns. Ima sits on her throne, surrounded by her slaves and soldiers who hold the captured enemy king. A soldier tries to push Mira to dance, but she refuses and the music stops. Ima stands and the music resumes as she dances in front of the enemy king, kicking him off the ground and killing him. She returns to her throne, and Mira dances for her. The next day, the Egyptians arrive at a peaceful kingdom, where the leader offers food to Ima. She looks around at the leader's bowed knees before walking away. Ima orders Camo to kill the people, but he refuses and gathers their offering instead. Ima threatens to kill Amal if Camo does not comply with her orders, so he returns to the leader and kills him. He then attacks and kills the townspeople as they scream and run away. That night, as Spear and the others sit in their cells, Spear stares at Camo in disgust. A soldier arrives with meat and throws it into the cells. Spear drops his meat outside the cell and knocks out the guard as he approaches. He grabs the key, unlocks his cell, and steps out. He opens Camo's cell, but Camo refuses to leave. Spear makes his way up the stairs and confronts Ima. He sees Mira dancing and Fang's eggs beside Ima. Mira sees Spear and screams, alerting the other slaves. Spear tries to fight Ima, but she uses her skills to fight back. Mira grabs the eggs and tries to escape, but Ima follows them. Spear knocks Ima down and attacks the soldiers. They make their way down the staircase, and the eggs hatch. Spear and Mira fight the soldiers as Ima punches Mira and takes the baby dinosaurs from her. Fang hears the cries of the dinosaurs, breaks out of her cage, and attacks the soldiers. Kama watched in horror as Ima threatened to kill the baby dinosaurs. The group was held captive by chains, with only Kama left standing with an axe in his hand. Ima ordered him to kill the creatures, but as Kama raised the axe, he was flooded with memories of his time in the village with the peaceful giant Africans. He thought of the time he had stopped Fang from killing a spider and the values of harmony and nonviolence that were at the heart of their tribe. As Kamo hesitated, Ima and her soldiers suddenly attacked the village, causing chaos and destruction. Kamo grabbed his axe and fought bravely, taking down many of the soldiers. But Ima was quick and managed to grab a mace from Kamo's shoulder, using it to threaten him. Kamo knelt before her, but instead of submitting, he used the opportunity to grab the axe and free Fang. With a fierce determination, Kamo threw the axe at Ima, intent on killing her. Ima narrowly dodged the attack, but the baby dinosaurs were able to run to their mother. Spear, who had freed himself from the chains, used a concrete slab as a weapon to fight off the remaining soldiers. Mira used her quick thinking and agility to retrieve a key and freeze herself, allowing her to release Spear from his restraints. Ima, enraged, stood up and ran towards a giant gun, determined to take down Fang. But Fang was quick on her feet and managed to dodge the shot. Ima then grabbed a spear gun and aimed it at Fang, but Spear pushed the weapon away just in time. The two engaged in a fierce fight, while Mira and Fang took on the soldiers. Kamo, in the meantime, had run to a room and discovered that his people were being forced to move the ship using giant paddles. As he watched in horror, an arrow hit one of the baby dinosaurs. Mira, filled with determination and love for her fellow creatures, grabbed the arrow and jumped off the ship, with Spear and Fang following closely behind. Ima screamed in frustration as they escaped. Kamo was soon surrounded by several soldiers, but he managed to knock them down with ease, inspired by the sight of his people fighting for their freedom. Meanwhile, Spear and the others swam away as the giant paddles moved towards them. But just in time, the paddles stopped moving and Kamo watched as his people defeated the soldiers and claimed victory. Spear took control of a small ship, killing the soldiers and freeing the slaves who had been forced to move the ship. Ima, still intent on causing harm, walked towards the stairs, but was met with resistance as the giant Africans emerged and attacked her and her soldiers. Kamo approached her, undaunted by her attempts to fight him off. He easily picked her up and, with a fierce determination, threw her off the side of the ship. Ima fell onto Spear's ship below and died upon impact. Spear and Mira looked up to see Kamo, relieved and happy to be reunited with his daughter. As the night fell and their ship sailed away, Amal tended to Kamo's wounds and the two watched as the chief, in the distance, walked on water as he continued his search for Spear and Fang. A young Spear stood by his side, watching as his father began to paint on a wall. Suddenly, several saber-toothed tigers emerged and attacked the village. Spear and his father fought bravely, but the tigers were fierce and injured Spear's father, biting off his arm. Despite this, Spear's father continued to fight, but was eventually killed and eaten by the tigers. Enraged, Spear fought on, killing most of the tigers. He managed to hide under a dead tiger as one more attacked, and used a rock to smash its head. In a fit of anger, he continued to smash its head until it was lifeless. As he stopped, the townspeople approached him, honoring him with a necklace and naming him as their new chief. Mira woke Spear up early in the morning, practically shaking with excitement. She led him out of the cave and towards the shore, where she pointed at her home. When they arrived, Mira broke down in tears as she stared at a tree. Spear tried to console her, and eventually, she was able to tell him about the traumatic event that had occurred there. She had been having fun with her friends and her lover when a strange man appeared on their shores and attacked them. He and his companions kidnapped Mira, killing her friend and branding her head as a sign of enslavement. The ship they were on encountered a storm, and an axe fell at Mira's feet. She used it to cut the chain that bound her and jumped into the water, narrowly escaping her captors. Mira continued crying as Fang and her children left the boat, the babies learning to swim for the first time. Spear and the others walked through the land until they arrived at a cave that night. Mira performed her prayer and Spear joined her. The following morning, Fang placed her children next to Spear and left the cave to search for food. She came across a woman bathing in a pond and was about to attack her when Mira and Spear heard the commotion and ran to Fang's aid. Mira stopped Fang and realized that the woman was actually her friend, Amara. Mira and Amara hugged tearfully as they were reunited after so long. Amara took them back to her hometown, and when Spear, Fang, and the babies arrived, the townspeople were terrified at the strangers in their midst. Mira calmed them and met with the chief, who declared that everyone should celebrate Mira's return. That night, the townspeople gathered around a fire to watch a performance. As someone dressed as the moon danced, they all bowed in reverence. Spear sat with Fang and the babies, watching the spectacle. The next day, Mira took them to an empty building, where Fang broke through the wall to create a makeshift home. She slept with her kids beside her while Spear couldn't sleep. He began drawing on the wall and eventually fell asleep himself. When Mira saw the drawings the next morning, she felt sorry for Spear as she watched him sleep. Spear sat and watched as Fang walked around, but the townspeople suddenly screamed as the chief arrived. Spear climbed up Fang and ran towards the chief, who wielded a weapon and attacked them. They fled, but the chief transformed into a snake and chased them up a hill. He set Spear on fire, but Spear pushed him off the hill and they both tumbled down. Mira rushed to Spear's side and quickly put out the flames that engulfed his body. The demonic entity emerged from the chief's body and dragged him down to the underworld. Mira begged for help, and they carried Spear back to the empty building. The witch doctor treated his wounds, but it was clear that he was gravely injured. Fang cried as she and her children left the room, and Spear mumbled Mira's name. Mira looked at the drawings on the wall and realized that Spear was in love with her. She climbed up onto the bed next to him and sat with him. Years later, Fang and her kids were walking around when Mira followed them. Spear and Mira's daughter sat on one of the kids, holding a spear as they faced off against a roaring dinosaur. The end.